Hey friends, welcome back to Interesting Chinese Culture. In China, there's a very important exam. It can even be said that this exam determines the fate of 90% of Chinese people. Why can one exam stir up such enormous social energy? To find the answer, we have to go back more than 1400 years, because deep in the cultural genes of Chinese people, there is a path of upward mobility paved by an ancient exam. If we trace it back through history, this exam can be seen as part of a system that crossed more than 1300 years, survived countless changes of dynasties, wars, and major social transformations, and yet still continues its core spirit in modern society in a completely new form. Is there a selection system that can make a farming family working in the fields firmly believe that their child can enter the highest halls of state power through studying and taking exams? Today, we are going to take a deep look at one of the most influential systems in Chinese history, and one of the systems that foreign friends are most curious about, the evolution from the ancient imperial examination to the modern Gaokao. To truly understand the logic behind modern Chinese behavior, family values, and the intense pursuit of education, we have to return to more than 1400 years ago, lift the veil from this ancient system, and see how it shaped the spiritual world of Chinese people. Our journey today begins at the starting point of this path. In the Han Dynasty, roughly from 200 BCE to 200 CE, China developed a method of selecting officials known as the recommendation system. Local officials were responsible for observing and recommending outstanding people from their own regions, and then sending those recommendations to the imperial court. The standards included filial and honest conduct, meaning respect for one's parents and moral integrity, as well as outstanding talent. This sounds very ideal. It seems to break through the limits of bloodline and allow people with virtue and ability to stand out. But in actual practice, who decided whether a person was filial or talented? It was the powerful local officials. As a result, the power of recommendation was soon monopolized by influential local clans. If you were born into a great family, your chances of being recommended were far higher than those of a child from an ordinary farming household. By the late Eastern Han Dynasty, this system had already become seriously corrupted. There were ironic cases where people recommended as talented scholars could not even read, and people praised as filial and honest did not even support their own fathers. This kind of system, which relied on other people's subjective judgment and recommendation, eventually became a tool for personal connections and power exchange. During the Wei, Jin, and Northern and Southern dynasties period, roughly from the 3rd century to the 6th century CE, China entered an age of division and warfare that lasted more than 300 years. During this period, a new official selection system appeared, known as the 9-rank system. The imperial court appointed an official called a central evaluator in each region, and this person was responsible for ranking local talent from the 1st rank to the 9th rank. In theory, this was meant to measure talent more accurately and assign people of different levels to official positions of different levels. But in actual practice, the position of central evaluator itself was controlled by powerful aristocratic families. The standard of evaluation gradually shifted away from talent and toward family background, meaning whose names appeared in your family genealogy. In the end, this created a rigid social pattern. High ranks never went to poor families, and low ranks never went to powerful clans. The highest ranks, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd ranks, always belonged to the same few great families. A child from an ordinary family, even if he was extremely talented, could only be placed in the 7th, 8th, or 9th rank and spend his whole life as a minor official. This was the difficult situation Chinese society faced by the end of the 6th century. Power was tightly held by a few dozen great families. If the emperor wanted to carry out policies, he had to consider the attitudes of these family elders. The officials sitting in the imperial court gave their loyalty first to their own families, and only after that to the state. It was not until the 6th century CE that China, after nearly 300 years of division, was reunified by a short-lived dynasty called the Sui. The founder of this unified empire, Emperor Wen of Sui Yangjian, faced an extremely difficult problem. Before this, the state selected officials through something called the 9-rank system. In simple terms, powerful aristocratic families in different regions were responsible for evaluating people's ranks, and then the imperial court appointed officials according to those ranks. After this system had run for several hundred years, it had completely become a game for aristocratic clans. Their evaluations always gave high ranks to their own sons and nephews, while people from humble backgrounds, no matter how talented they were, could only be ranked low and would never be able to enter the core of power. The power of the state was firmly held in the hands of a few great families, while the emperor himself seemed more like a puppet who had been pushed aside. Yang Jian was determined to end all of this. He wanted to take back the power to select officials. He wanted to build a bureaucratic group that answered directly to the emperor. So, in the 7th year of the Kaiwang reign in 587 CE, he made a decision that changed history. He issued an imperial order requiring the administrative leaders of each local prefecture and county to recommend 3 outstanding scholars every year and send them to Chang'an to take an exam organized by the Department of State Affairs. What did the exam test? It tested their understanding of Confucian classics, their ability to handle government affairs, and their writing and insight. This was not simple recommendation. It was a firm rule that made exam results the final standard for selection. With one order, a completely new era began. This was the early form of the imperial examination system. Qi referred to examination subjects, and Ju referred to selection and recommendation. From then on, whether a person could become an official no longer depended only on his family name, but on what he knew. Yang Jian used a blade called examination to cut into the foundation of aristocratic politics. Before the examination system appeared, the distribution of power in China followed a completely different logic. In the earliest Xia, Shang, and Zhou periods, roughly from 2000 BCE to the 3rd century BCE, the transfer of political power basically depended on bloodline. If your father was a noble, then you were a noble. If your grandfather was an official in charge of rituals, that position would most likely be passed down to you. This system was hereditary office and hereditary salary. In plain language, it meant that who your father was decided who you were. Social class was like a piece of solidified amber, and people at the bottom had almost no chance of moving upward. A farmer who worked the land would most likely have a son, a grandson, and a great-grandson who also worked the land. If you compare this period with Europe around the same time, you will find that early human civilizations chose a surprisingly similar solution when facing the problem of distributing power. Bloodline decided everything. In other words, without the imperial examination system, if ordinary people wanted to become officials, they might only be able to rely on being born into the right family. However, the Sui dynasty was too short-lived. It only hurriedly built a basic framework. The dynasty that truly poured this framework into a solid building was the Tang dynasty that followed right after it, and the passion and creativity that Tang people invested in this matter were truly astonishing.
The Tang dynasty can be said to be a period when the imperial examination system began to play a real role. From 618 to 907 CE, the imperial examination system truly took shape and developed with great energy. During the reign of Emperor Taizong of Tang, Li Shiming, he once did something very interesting. One time, he stood on the Duanmen Tower of the imperial palace and watched the newly successful Jinshi candidates enter one after another to receive appointments from the court. Looking at the proud and energetic faces of these young men, he said something that roughly meant, "All the heroes under heaven have entered my pocket." This sentence very directly reveals the political nature of the imperial examination system. It was not only an educational selection system. First of all, it was a political tool used by the emperor to gather talent from across the empire, weaken powerful local clans, and strengthen central authority. You have to imagine that scene. A young man from a remote mountain village or a declining small family had only one asset, his mind. From childhood, he studied in a private school or simply at home, following his elders and working through those difficult Confucian classics word by word. When he believed he had learned enough, his long journey began. This was the first step of the imperial examination, called local recommendation or local examination. This was different from the local exams we understand in later periods. In the early Tang dynasty, it was more like a qualification review and preliminary selection. This young man had to bring his place of origin and proof of identity, first report to his local prefecture or county, and go through an initial screening and recommendation. Local officials would test him, and only if they believed he truly had potential would they put him on the list recommended to the central government. Once he received this entry ticket, he became a candidate. He would carry a book box and simple luggage, leave his hometown, and set out on the long road to the capital, Chang'an. For an ordinary family, this was often an investment that used up everything they had. The travel money might have to be borrowed from every relative, and sometimes the family even had to sell property. These candidates traveled through wind and rain, slept outdoors, and walked for months, sometimes even half a year, all just to reach the most prosperous city in the world and fight for an unknown future. Back then, every spring, Chang'an would gather hundreds or even thousands of these candidates. They all came for the same goal, the national examination hosted by the Ministry of Rites, known as the provincial examination. The Tang Dynasty imperial examinations had many categories, but the most sought after and most glorious one was only one subject, the Jinshi examination. There were many subjects in the Tang Dynasty imperial examination system, including the Jinshi examination, the Mingjing examination, the law examination, the mathematics examination, and others. Among them, the Jinshi examination was the most prestigious and also the most difficult. The Jinshi examination tested poetry, rhapsody, and policy essays. It required candidates not only to write beautiful and impressive literary pieces, but also to propose practical solutions to current political problems. The number of people admitted through the Tang imperial examinations each year was very small. Sometimes the Jinshi examination accepted only 20 or 30 people in an entire year. How difficult was it to pass the Jinshi examination? At that time, there was a widely spread saying, 30 was old for passing the Mingjing examination, but 50 was young for passing the Jinshi examination. It meant that if someone passed the Mingjing examination at 30, people already considered him old and not very promising. But if someone passed the Jinshi examination at 50, people would actually congratulate him and call him a young success. From this, you can see just how difficult it was. Why was it so difficult? Because the Jinshi examination tested a person's real talent and creativity. Its most central content was poetry and rhapsody. Your literary talent, your ability to choose and arrange words, and your sense of rhythm and beauty were all revealed in those poems and essays. And this kind of talent could not be developed through simple memorization alone. So Tang Dynasty scholars had to grow up immersed in poetry. And it is no surprise that the entire Tang Dynasty became a dynasty of poetry. The Tang imperial examination also had one major feature that was completely different from later generations. The candidates' names were not hidden. In other words, the examiners could directly see each candidate's name and place of origin. In terms of fairness, this greatly reduced the level of impartiality. The personal preferences of the chief examiner, as well as the candidate's own reputation, became extremely important. So, before the official provincial examination, another extremely lively preliminary competition would take place in Chang'an. Candidates would carefully copy their best poems and essays onto beautiful scrolls, and then visit powerful princes, nobles, or literary leaders, asking them to read and comment on their work. This process was called presenting scrolls. If doing it once was not enough, they might send their work a second time. This was called warming up the scrolls. Their goal was to build their reputation in Chang'an's cultural circles. The greater a person's fame, the greater the chance that when his examination paper reached the examiner's hands, it would be viewed more favorably. This custom allowed many great poets who failed in the examination hall to gain enormous fame outside it. For example, Ming Haoran, who wrote the famous line about sleeping through a spring morning without noticing dawn, was extremely talented and had also gone to Chang'an to take the examination, but he ultimately failed. Another poet, Du Fu, failed the examination twice. In the end, he had to take another route and present several grand rhapsodies to the emperor before finally gaining an official opportunity. In that era, talent and opportunity did not always fully pay off in the examination hall. The true winners in the examination system were people like Wang Wei. It is said that he received the appreciation of Princess Yuzhen. With one pipa performance and several new poems, he won first place in the examination. The Tang imperial examination was just like the spirit of that dynasty, romantic,
free, full of talent, yet also carrying a touch of roughness and unrestrained human feeling. However, the Tang imperial examinations still kept some old habits from earlier dynasties and did not achieve complete fairness. The candidates' papers were not fully sealed, and examiners could see the candidates' names before grading them. Also, before the exam, candidates would usually present their poems and essays to respected officials at court and ask them to recommend them. This was called presenting scrolls. This meant that although the examination itself was open, personal connections and reputation still played an important role in the admission process. A poor scholar with no background at all, and a young gentleman from a famous family whose poems were already widely praised in the capital, were not standing at exactly the same starting line in the examination hall. In order to present their scrolls, Tang candidates visited powerful officials everywhere, and some even wrote extremely exaggerated poems and essays to attract attention. This formed a unique kind of Tang Dynasty scholars' social culture. Although this system selected many people with brilliant literary talent, it also planted the seeds for later institutional loopholes. After the fall of the Tang Dynasty, China entered another divided period known as the 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms. The heavy burden of history eventually fell into the hands of the emperors of the Song Dynasty. The Song emperors, especially the founding emperor Zhao Kuangyin, came from a military background and seized power through a military coup. Because of this, he was extremely cautious toward any force that might threaten imperial authority. He needed an absolutely reliable and absolutely loyal civil official system to govern the country. In his view, the Tang-style imperial examination, with its strong flavor of personal connections, had to be completely transformed into a machine of absolute fairness. The dynasty that truly made the imperial examination system close to a fair exam in the modern sense was the Song dynasty. From 960 to 1279 CE, the Song dynasty carried out a series of revolutionary reforms to the imperial examination. The emperors of the Song learned the lesson of the late Tang dynasty, when military generals became too powerful and regional military governors divided the country. So the Song established a basic national policy that valued civil officials over military power. In order to allow truly talented scholars to stand out and to stop the children of powerful families from taking places through personal connections, the Song dynasty invented 3 major anti-cheating reforms. The Song Revolution in the imperial examination appeared in several ways. First, it built an extremely strict anti-cheating system. The first step was hiding the candidate's name, which Song people called sealing the paper. On every exam paper handed in by a candidate, the front section, where the candidate's name, place of origin, and information about 3 generations of his father and ancestors were written, would be carefully covered with thick paper by a special official and stamped with a seal. In this way, the first examiner who graded the paper would have no idea who had written it. The first reform was called hiding the name, also known as sealing. After the candidate's paper was handed in, special officials would cover the candidate's name, place of origin, and other personal information with paper, and assign the paper a number. What the examiner saw was only an anonymous answer sheet. He did not know whose hand had written the essay. The second reform was called transcription. To prevent examiners from recognizing a particular candidate through handwriting, all exam papers would be copied again by special scribes in a unified writing style and then sent to the examiners for grading. The third reform was called locking the examiners inside the examination compound. After the chief examiner was appointed, he would immediately be locked inside the examination hall and completely cut off from the outside world. He could not come out until the exam was over and the grading was finished. During this period, he could not meet anyone or receive any letters in order to prevent any form of private request or bribery. Together, these 3 systems built a selection structure in 10th century China that was among the closest to procedural justice anywhere in the world at that time. While Europe in the same period was still relying on bloodline and the loyalty of knights to distribute power, China had already built an extremely strict anonymous examination and anti-cheating system. The Song dynasty also greatly expanded the number of people admitted. In the Tang dynasty, only 20 or 30 jinshi candidates might be accepted in a year. In the Song dynasty, 200 or 300 could be accepted in a year, sometimes even more. This meant that more children from ordinary families had real opportunities. Among the chancellors of the Song dynasty, a considerable proportion came from ordinary farming families or small merchant families. This would have been unimaginable in earlier dynasties. The Song dynasty also established a very important principle. The imperial examination became almost the only legal path for common people's sons to change their fate. In the Tang dynasty, a person could still enter officialdom through military achievement or family privilege. By the Song dynasty, these side paths were greatly reduced. If you wanted to become an official, the most respectable, most orthodox, and most socially recognized path was to study, take the exam, and pass the Jinshi examination. The value direction of the whole society was completely transformed. The saying that all other pursuits were inferior and only studying was truly high became widely spread later, but the social belief behind it was established in the Song dynasty. If the son of a blacksmith studied well and passed the Jinshi examination, he could become the head of a county or even enter the imperial court and become a chancellor. His father, a craftsman who had spent his whole life forging iron, would suddenly be looked at by his neighbors in a completely new way. This possibility, this hope that my child might live a different life, was deeply carved into the collective psychology of Chinese society. The Song dynasty greatly raised the status and honor that came after passing the imperial examination. In the Tang dynasty, passing the Jinshi examination only gave a person the qualification to become an official. He still had to wait for the Ministry of Personnel's official selection exam, and many people might wait for years, only to receive a very minor post in the end. But in the Song dynasty, everything was different. As long as you passed the provincial level exam, you would attend the palace examination personally hosted by the emperor. Inside the solemn hall of the imperial palace, you answered the final policy questions. Then, the emperor would personally decide the rankings on the spot. The most exciting moment was the public announcement of the rankings. The emperor took his seat. All the candidates kneeled neatly in front of the palace hall. The eunuchs, in their sharp and clear voices, read out the names one by one, from first place to third place. When a person's name was called, imperial guards led him out of the line. At that moment, he officially changed from an ordinary commoner into a student of the Son of Heaven. After that, the grand celebration began. The emperor would grant a banquet to honor them. The top 3 would be given very high official positions, and the others could also directly enter the imperial bureaucracy, serving as 7th rank or 8th rank local officials. This was no longer just a qualification, it was a direct route. Yesterday, a farmer's son might still have been planting rice in the field. Today, he could put on official robes and become the parent official of a county. The idea that someone could be a farmer's son in the morning and enter the emperor's hall by evening became a living reality in the Song dynasty. The full fairness of the exam, combined with the supreme glory of the result, made the belief that all other pursuits were inferior and only studying was truly high sink deeper into people's hearts than ever before. The whole society was mobilized. As long as an ordinary farming family had even a little extra grain, they would grit their teeth, choose the smartest child among their children, and send him to a village school. The hope of the entire family was placed on this one child. Fan Zhongyan, a famous official of the Northern Song dynasty, lost his father when he was young, and his mother remarried. He studied hard in a ruined temple, dividing his thin porridge into portions and cutting pickled vegetables into small pieces to survive. In the end, he passed the Jinshi examination, changed his own fate, and changed the future of his family. His story inspired countless poor scholars in later generations. The Song dynasty also gave rise to an extremely intense social custom called catching a son-in-law under the examination list. Every time the examination results were posted, as soon as the names of the newly successful Jinshi candidates appeared on the list, powerful officials and wealthy merchants in the capital would send their servants to wait under the list. Once they saw a young unmarried Jinshi, they would immediately rush forward and take him back home, directly forcing him to marry their daughter. Many wealthy merchants did not even care how poor the Jinshi's family was. As long as he had passed the exam, he was a rising asset. This society-wide obsession with imperial examination success reached a peak in the Song dynasty. It sent an extremely powerful message to the whole society. Studying and taking exams was the investment with the highest return and the greatest respect in this society. Through this precise system, the Song dynasty truly and completely destroyed the aristocratic clan politics that had lasted for hundreds of years and built a civil government made purely of scholars. The power of knowledge completely defeated the power of bloodline. But once any system is pushed to its extreme, it can easily become rigid. The next stage of the imperial examination system, the Yuan, Ming, and Qing dynasties, would witness this process.
The Yuan dynasty, from 1271 to 1368, was a dynasty established by the Mongols. The Mongol rulers had a very cold attitude toward the imperial examination. In their eyes, what the empire needed for administration were warriors who could ride horses and fight wars, as well as clerks who could handle specific administrative tasks, not scholars who wrote beautiful essays. The Yuan dynasty came from the grasslands, and it was not very interested in this selection game of Han Chinese scholars. For a time, the imperial examination was suspended for a long period. The Ming dynasty later restored it, but also pushed the imperial examination onto a road of extreme formalism. The name of that road was the eight-leg essay. The eight-leg essay was like a precise cage built for thought. First, it strictly limited the range of exam topics. All questions could only come from the 4 books and 5 classics, the Confucian classics from more than 1,000 years earlier. Second, it limited the way answers could be written. Your understanding of the classics had to follow the commentaries of Zhu Xi, the Southern Song Neo-Confucian scholar. You were not allowed to have your own thoughts. Your task was to speak on behalf of the sages, pretending that you were Confucius or Mencius, and writing in their tone. The most terrifying part was the strict format. An 8-leg essay was made up of 8 fixed sections: opening the topic, carrying the topic forward, beginning the discussion, entering the argument, the initial leg, the middle leg, the later leg, and the closing leg. In the last 4 sections, each part required 2 parallel passages with strict matching structure and rhythm. It was like dancing in chains with the most beautiful words, while every single step had already been decided for you. The length of the essay was also strictly controlled. As a result, an exam that should have tested ideas about governing the country and the ability to think critically completely declined into a word game. What it tested was no longer thought, but technique, and how well you had mastered this complicated format. This kind of rigid exam inevitably created a rigid social mindset. From the first day a scholar began his education until his hair turned white, his entire life was locked inside this 8-leg essay template. All knowledge that did not meet the needs of the exam, such as natural science and engineering technology, was treated as strange and improper tricks, unworthy of serious study. While the Western world was undergoing the scientific revolution, while Newton was discovering universal gravitation and Watt was improving the steam engine, China's smartest intellectuals locked themselves in their studies, practicing essay structure again and again, wearing themselves out over an empty piece of parallel phrasing. The famous story of Fan Jin passing the provincial exam in The Scholars is the sharpest portrayal of this. Fan Jin was an old student in his 50s, poor and miserable, living on help from his father-in-law, and anyone could insult him. But when he suddenly received the good news that he had passed the exam, the overwhelming joy struck him so hard that he lost his mind and went mad. His father-in-law, Butcher Hu, the man who had beaten and scolded him before, raised his hand to slap him. But at that moment, he simply could not bring himself to do it. In his eyes, Fan Jin was no longer that useless poor son-in-law. He had become the star of literature descended to earth, a heavenly figure who could not be struck. The title from one exam made a person rise directly from the ground to the sky in other people's eyes. This absurd scene deeply reveals how the imperial examination system twisted human nature. In the early Yuan dynasty, the imperial examination was abolished for nearly 40 years. It was not restored until 1313 CE, and even then, the scale was very small. The number of admissions was extremely limited, and different ethnic groups faced different admission standards. The Mongol rulers divided the population of the empire into 4 groups. Mongols and Simu people faced much easier exams than Han people and Southern people. This was a clear period of regression in the history of the imperial examination.
But even so, the idea of the imperial examination as a system never disappeared from Chinese memory. Although Han Chinese intellectuals were politically suppressed, they continued to preserve the seed of studying and taking exams through private schools and family education. The Ming Dynasty, from 1368 to 1644, restored the imperial examination under Zhu Yuanzhang, and he made a transformation that had a deep and lasting impact. The Ming imperial examination formed an extremely strict and clearly layered system. To understand this system, we need to break down each step in detail and see how a scholar in ancient China climbed the ladder of power step by step. The lowest level of the examination was called the children's examination. In fact, it was not just one exam, but a chain of 3 stages: the county exam, the prefectural exam, and the academy exam. Any scholar, no matter how old he was, even if he was already 80 years old, was legally called a child student as long as he had not passed this examination. The county exam was held in the local county and supervised by the county magistrate. Only after passing the county exam could a candidate take the prefectural exam, which was held in the higher-level prefectural city. After passing the prefectural exam, he could then take the academy exam, hosted by the provincial education official. Only after passing the academy exam did he truly step through the gate of official achievement and become a shukai. The status of shukai brought very practical privileges in the Ming Dynasty. First, a shukai was exempt from part of the taxes and labor service. In ancient times, heavy labor service could be enough to bankrupt an ordinary family, so the status of shukai directly protected the family's property. Second, when a shukai met the county magistrate, he did not have to kneel. In a strictly hierarchical ancient society, this kind of privilege and physical posture was an enormous psychological comfort. Finally, he gained the right to study in government-run schools and became qualified to take the next higher-level exam, the provincial examination. However, a shukai could not become an official. If someone spent his whole life only passing the shukai level, he was still a commoner, just a commoner with certain privileges. Above the children's examination was the provincial examination. It was held once every 3 years in autumn, so it was called the autumn examination. The exam took place in each provincial capital. Only shukai were qualified to take it. The admission rate of the provincial examination was extremely low, usually only a few percent. After passing the provincial examination, a candidate became a juren. Becoming a juren was a huge leap because he finally gained the qualification to become an official. Although he usually could only serve in lower-ranking positions, such as assistant county magistrate or education instructor, he had officially entered the reserve list of the state bureaucracy. The first-place candidate in the provincial examination was called the Jiyuan. The next level was the National Metropolitan Examination. It was held in the capital in the spring of the year after the provincial examination, so it was called the Spring Examination. Only Jiyuan could take it. The Metropolitan Examination was hosted by the Ministry of Rights, and the number of admissions was usually around 300. After passing the Metropolitan Examination, a candidate was called a gongshi. The first-place candidate in the Metropolitan Examination was called the huiyuan. The final stage was the Palace Examination, personally hosted by the emperor. It was held inside the imperial palace, where the gongshi directly faced the emperor. The palace examination did not eliminate candidates, it only ranked them. Those who passed were called jinshi. The jinshi were divided into 3 classes. The first class had only 3 people, the zhuangyuan, the bangyuan, and the tanhua, and they were granted the title jinshi with honors. The second class included a number of candidates, who were granted the title jinshi background. The third class also included a number of candidates who were granted the title same background as jinshi. After the palace examination ended, the zhuangyuan would be appointed as an editor in the Hanling Academy. This was the fast track into the highest core of imperial power. If a scholar placed first in the provincial examination, the metropolitan examination, and the palace examination in a row, winning the titles Jinyuan, Huiyuan, and Zhuangyuan one after another, this was called winning the top title 3 times in succession. In the entire history of the Chinese imperial examination, people who achieved this were extremely rare. Its difficulty was no less than winning the grand prize in a modern lottery 3 times in a row. Now let us look at the real conditions candidates faced during the Ming and Qing examinations. Take the provincial examination as an example. The exam was usually held in the 8th lunar month. Candidates had to enter the examination compound in advance. The walls of the compound were extremely high, and thorns were placed on top to prevent people from climbing over the walls to cheat. When candidates entered the compound, they had to go through an extremely strict body search. Examiners would check their clothes, shoes, and even hair to prevent hidden notes. Throughout history, candidates tried every possible way to cheat. Some copied the 4 books and 5 classics in tiny writing onto their underclothes. Some hid cheat sheets inside the soles of their shoes. Some even trained pigeons to carry answers in and out of the examination site. To deal with this, the cord search methods were also extremely harsh. Sometimes candidates were even required to take off all their clothes for inspection. After the body search, candidates entered the examination cells. These cells were rows of tiny compartments inside the examination compound. Each cell was extremely small, usually only about 3 feet wide and 4 feet deep. There was no door and no bed. The candidate had to stay inside for 3 days and 2 nights and complete 3 sessions of the exam. During the day, he put 2 wooden boards together as a desk to write on. At night, he stacked the boards together and used them as a bed. Because the space was so small, he could not even stretch his legs when sleeping. During these 3 days and 2 nights, eating, drinking, and using the toilet all happened inside the cell. If the weather was good, it was barely bearable. If it rained, the cell might leak, and the candidate could only hold an umbrella with one hand while answering questions with the other. The exam paper was often soaked by rainwater. At night, oil lamps burned inside the cells, and the smell was extremely unpleasant because the person next to you might be using the toilet. Even worse, fires often broke out inside the examination compound, and some people suddenly died because of extreme pressure and terrible conditions. The imperial examination was not only a contest of intelligence, but also an extremely brutal test of the body and willpower. Another core feature of the Ming imperial examination was the 8-leg essay. Zhu Yuanzhang established the 8-leg essay as the standard writing form for the imperial examination. The 8-leg essay was a highly formalized argumentative essay. Its structure was strictly divided into 8 parts: opening the topic, carrying the topic forward, beginning the discussion, entering the topic, the initial leg, the middle leg, the later leg, and the closing leg. Among these, the initial leg, middle leg, later leg, and closing leg each had to contain 2 parallel passages with neatly matched structure and equal length. Together, they formed 8 parallel sections, which is why it was called the 8-leg essay. The content of the 8-leg essay was also strictly limited. Questions could only come from the 4 books and 5 classics, and candidates had to explain their views from the standpoint of the ancient sages. They were not allowed to express personal opinions. You could not say, "I think there is a problem with this idea." You could only say, "The meaning of the sage is this. Why did they create such a system?" From Zhu Yuanzhang's point of view, there was a very clear political logic behind it. He needed scholars across the country to spend all their energy memorizing and interpreting a few fixed classics, instead of studying astronomy, geography, military technology, trade, or any other field that might produce unorthodox ideas. The 8-leg essay limited the production of knowledge within an extremely narrow framework, while using standardized writing training to discipline patterns of thought. The better you were at writing 8-leg essays, the more used you became to thinking inside a fixed framework, and the less likely you were to question the framework itself. This was an extremely precise tool of thought control. But to be fair, on a technical level, the 8-leg essay also had its own reason for existing. When hundreds of thousands of exam papers had to be graded every year, a highly standardized format could greatly improve grading efficiency and consistency. If every candidate wrote freely, with some writing prose, some writing poetry, and some writing fiction, how could examiners compare them fairly? The 8-leg essay provided a unified standard for judgment. In fact, this logic is somewhat similar to multiple choice questions and fixed format essays in today's standardized exams.
The Qing dynasty, from 1644 to 1912, basically followed the imperial examination system of the Ming dynasty, and the eight-leg essay continued to be the core form of the exam. As the last feudal dynasty in Chinese history, the Qing inherited this entire system and kept adjusting and repairing it, making it operate even more tightly. In that era, for an ordinary scholar, the road of the imperial examination became an extremely long and extremely cruel ladder. The first step was the children's examination. A candidate had to take 3 rounds, 1 main exam and 2 follow-up exams. Only after passing the county exam, the prefectural exam, and the academy exam could he finally become a shukai. What were the benefits of becoming a shukai? You could wear a long scholar's robe and be respectfully called young master. You did not have to kneel when meeting an official. You were exempt from personal labor service and certain taxes. This was already the entry ticket into the privileged class. But it was only the beginning. The second step was the provincial examination. It was held in the provincial capital once every 3 years in autumn, so it was also called the autumn examination. Shukai from across the entire province gathered there. The examination site was called the examination compound. What kind of place was it? It was filled with tiny cells packed closely together, one after another, like a honeycomb. These cells were called examination rooms. After each candidate entered, the door outside was locked. For 3 days and 2 nights, eating, drinking, using the toilet, and sleeping all had to be done inside this narrow space of less than 2 square meters. During the day, you placed a wooden board on brick supports and used it as a desk. At night, you moved the board down and joined it with another board to make a bed. In the extreme heat of summer, the cell was hot and suffocating. Mosquitoes and insects bit you. The smell of sweat mixed with all kinds of other smells. This was not only a contest of intelligence, but also a brutal test of the body and willpower. In this place, you had to write 3 essays, 1 poem, and discuss 5 questions on current government policy. If you survived these 3 days and came out alive, that itself was already a kind of victory. If you passed, congratulations, you were now a jurin. This status meant that you had officially entered the scholar gentry class. You now had the qualification to become an official. You could serve as a county education instructor or a minor administrative clerk. More importantly, your family immediately became a respected local household. Smaller families around you might come with their land and place themselves under your name in order to avoid labor service. This is why, after Fan Jin passed the provincial examination, people immediately gave him silver and houses. A jurin was already a status that could bring honor to one's ancestors. But the journey still continued. The third step was the metropolitan examination. It was held at the Ministry of Rights in the capital, Beijing, in the spring of the year after the provincial examination, so it was called the spring examination. Jurin from all over the country flowed into the capital like small streams joining the sea. This exam followed a process similar to the provincial examination and was also spent inside examination cells, but the competition was even more intense. If you passed again, you were no longer a jurin, but a gongshi. Now, you were qualified to meet the highest ruler of the empire. The fourth step, and also the final stage, was the palace examination. It was held inside the magnificent Forbidden City, for example, in the Hall of Preserving Harmony, and the emperor would personally oversee the exam. This exam had only one question, called a policy question. It was a question raised by the emperor about major state policies. You had to write down your strategy for governing the country on the spot. In principle, this exam no longer eliminated candidates. It only rearranged the ranking of all gongshi and decided their final order. The moment the results were announced was known as the Grand Announcement in the Golden Palace. It was the highest honor in a scholar's life during the feudal era. The emperor would arrive at the Hall of Supreme Harmony, and all officials would stand solemnly. All the gongshi, dressed in official robes, stood in lines in the square according to their ranks. Drums and music sounded together. Officials from the Court of State Ceremonial called out each person's name in a long and solemn tone, starting from the first name in the first class. This voice was then carried on by guards one station after another, echoing throughout the entire Forbidden City. The first class admitted only 3 people. The first place was the Zhuang Yuan. The second place was the Bangyan. The third place was the Tanhua. These 3 people were granted the title of Jinshi with honors and entered the most central institution, the Hanlin Academy, to take official posts directly.
They could ride tall horses along Chang'an Avenue and receive the attention of countless people. What an incredible honor that was. Afterward, the court would set up the Jinshi name tablets, carving their names forever into the stone forest of the Imperial Academy. From that moment on, your name was written into history. What a long road this was. From the first time you stepped into a village school, to the moment your name finally appeared on the golden list, your youth had already been used up, and your hair might already have turned gray. You spent your entire life completing this magnificent climb from the bottom of society to the center of power. And along this road, countless people fell halfway, exhausted their family wealth, lost their minds, and spent their whole lives trapped inside the dream of the imperial examination. This imprisonment of thought directly led to the backwardness of the entire country. When Western warships and cannons forced open the gates of the ancient empire, people painfully discovered that those so-called pillars of the state, who could write beautiful eight-legged essays, were shockingly ignorant and powerless when facing modern technology, democratic systems, and industrial civilization. A system that had once been glorious had finally reached its end.
In 1905, amid nationwide calls for reform, the Qing government issued an imperial order abolishing the imperial examination system, which had lasted for more than 1,300 years. Just like that, the 1,300-year imperial examination system came to an end. But the social shock caused by its abolition was enormous. In the age of the imperial examination, studying, taking exams, and becoming an official formed a clear and visible life path. A private school teacher in a village taught children to read the 4 books and 5 classics in order to prepare them for the imperial examination. A family spent everything it had to support a son's education because they knew that once he passed, the social status and economic condition of the entire family would fundamentally change. After the imperial examination was abolished, this path suddenly disappeared. Those scholars who had already spent 10 or 20 years preparing for the exam discovered overnight that all their knowledge and skills had become useless. A huge vacuum appeared in the whole society's path of upward mobility. During the Republican period from 1912 to 1949, China tried to build a modern education system. Universities began to enroll students, but the admission methods were all different. Some universities created their own entrance exams, some looked at recommendation letters, and some looked at secondary school grades. There was no unified national standard. Also, very few people could attend university. Most of them were children from middle-class and wealthy urban families. For children from the vast countryside, many could not even finish primary school, let alone think about university. In 1949, the People's Republic of China was founded. The new government faced an urgent task: how to train a group of intellectuals and technical professionals who could build a modern industrial system in the shortest possible time, starting from an agricultural country where more than 80% of the population was illiterate. In 1952, China held its first nationwide unified college entrance examination. This was the birth of the Gaokao. The first Gaokao was held on August 15th and 16th, 1952. Across the country, 66,000 candidates took the exam, and 66,400 people were admitted. Yes, you heard that correctly. The number of admitted students was even larger than the number of test takers. This was because China at that time was extremely short of people with higher education, and there were more university places than candidates. In that era, getting into university meant that after graduation, the state would assign you a job. You would become an engineer, teacher, doctor, or government cadre. Your household registration would be transferred from the countryside to the city, and you would receive a stable job guaranteed by the state. In an age of material shortage, this was almost the same as gaining lifelong security. Then history took an extremely cruel turn. In 1966, the Cultural Revolution began. Universities stopped admitting students. The Gaokao was canceled. In the following 10 years, from 1966 to 1976, China did not hold the Gaokao even once. The students admitted into universities were called worker-peasant-soldier students. They were recommended by grassroots units, did not need to take an exam, and were mainly judged by political performance and family background. If a farmer's son came from a family classified as poor or lower-middle peasant, he might be recommended to attend university.
But if a professor's son had a father labeled as a bourgeois intellectual or a reactionary academic authority, he not only lost the right to attend university, but might even suffer discrimination and persecution while being sent down to the countryside for labor. 10 full years, from 1966 to 1976, the youth of an entire generation was put on hold. Those young people who should have walked into examination rooms at 18 were instead tightening screws in factories, planting rice and cutting wheat in the countryside, or herding cattle on farms in border regions. Many of them secretly flipped through old textbooks they had managed to get from different places during breaks from labor. Under kerosene lamps, they solved math problems and memorized English words. They did not know when those days would end. They did not know whether exams would ever return. But they did not dare stop studying, because if the opportunity really came one day, they did not want to be completely unprepared. In 1976, the Gang of Four was arrested, and the Cultural Revolution came to an end. In August 1977, Deng Xiaoping, who had only recently returned to work, chaired a symposium on science and education. At the meeting, he made a decision that changed the fate of countless people. The Gaokao would be restored, and it would be held that very year. When the news spread, it was already October. The exam was scheduled for December. Across the whole country, people had less than 2 months to prepare. What made things even harder was that after 10 years of interruption, textbooks were gone, teaching outlines were gone, and many teachers themselves had not touched textbooks for 10 years. Old teaching materials were urgently reprinted in different regions, and long lines formed outside Xinhua bookstores. At sent-down youth sites in the countryside, in factory dormitories, and in military barracks, countless people dug out old textbooks that had been buried at the bottom of trunks for years, their pages already yellowed and curled. In December 1977, 5.7 million candidates in China walked into examination rooms. This number included all the young people of examination age who had been held back from 1966 to 1977. 18-year-olds and 30-year-olds sat in the same examination room. Recent high school graduates and people who had already farmed in the countryside for 10 years faced the same test paper. The admission rate that year was 4.8%. Out of 5.7 million people, only 270,000 were admitted. Those 270,000 people later became known as the Class of 1977. Among them emerged large numbers of scientists, entrepreneurs, writers, professors, and government officials. They became the backbone of Chinese society over the following 40 years. If you meet a professor in a Chinese university today who is in his or her 60s, or if you see the resume of a founder in a company's annual report, there is a fairly high chance that the education section says that this person entered university in 1977. The restoration of the Gaokao in 1977 left a very deep mark on Chinese social psychology. In an extremely dramatic way, it proved one thing: exams were the most reliable way for ordinary people to change their fate. After those chaotic years when family background decided everything, and recommendations and personal connections decided everything, the exam returned. Before scores, everyone was equal. It did not matter who your father was. It did not matter how much money your family had. It did not matter who you knew. What mattered was whether the answers on your test paper were correct. For Chinese society after 10 years of turmoil, the return of this kind of procedural justice meant far more than education itself. It was a rebuilding of social trust. From 1977 to today, the Gaokao has gone through many reforms. The exam subjects have changed, from the early division between humanities and sciences to the later 3+X model, and then to the new Gaokao model now promoted in some provinces. Admission methods have changed, from being decided completely by scores to introducing multiple channels such as independent admission and comprehensive evaluation. The exam time has also changed, from the original July to the current midsummer period, because July was considered too hot and could affect candidates' performance. But one thing has never changed. The Gaokao is still the largest, most competitive, and most socially watched single event in all of China. Every summer, during those specific days, the rhythm of the entire Chinese society makes way for this exam. At this point, it suddenly reminds me of my own experience taking the Gaokao back then. Although I do not really understand the current Gaokao system, from my personal point of view, when I took the Gaokao, there was one system that felt extremely absurd, even laughable. It was called guessing your score. In other words, candidates had to memorize the answers they had written during the exam, then go home and estimate their final score, and then apply to universities based on that estimated score. Even back then, I thought this rule was unbelievably ridiculous. For now, let us not even go into the deeper problem that some subjects are very hard to estimate with a precise number, such as political exam questions that involve discussion, or the final Chinese language writing task, where you write an essay based on a title or a short story. The scores for this kind of question naturally fluctuate a lot, which greatly increases the difficulty of guessing your final score. Also, the most ridiculous thing to me at the time was this. If all candidates were able to remember their answers accurately in such a short time, then there would not be students with very high or very low exam scores in the first place. In other words, some students already had difficulty remembering the knowledge points they needed to learn, yet they were required to memorize the questions and answers on their own exam paper within 90 minutes. Back then, there were many students who failed to attend their ideal universities because they guessed their scores incorrectly. Because with just 1 point of difference, a student could be separated from thousands or even tens of thousands of other students and miss the university they wanted. Now, let us return to today's topic. So why is the Gaokao so important to Chinese people? Why can one exam taken by an 18-year-old child draw in the emotions and resources of an entire family, or even an entire clan? Some families even say they will use the strength of the whole family to support one child in getting into an ideal and well-known university. The most fundamental reason is the conflict between scale and scarcity. China has a population of 1.4 billion. Every year, more than 10 million candidates compete for about 10 million university admission places. It sounds as if everyone has a chance to go to university, but the key problem is that not all universities are the same.
China has about 3,000 higher education institutions, but at the top of the pyramid are the so-called Project 985 and Project 211 universities, now generally known as double first-class universities. Altogether, there are only a little more than 100 of them. The total number of places offered by these top universities each year is only a few 100,000. Among more than 10 million people, only the top few percent can enter these schools. In China's current job market and social understanding, which university you graduate from largely determines the starting point of your first job, your starting salary, and the industry and platform you can enter. A graduate from Tsinghua University or Peking University and a graduate from an ordinary second-tier undergraduate college face different worlds on the day they graduate. It is like the difference between a student admitted to an Ivy League university and a student attending a community college in a small city. The job choices they face later are completely different. The second reason is that the Gaokao plays the role of a fair judge in Chinese society. China is a society built heavily on personal relationships. In daily life, connections, networks, and family background all play a role in many things. To find a job, people may look for connections. To do business, people may rely on networks. To see a doctor, people may try to know someone inside the hospital. But when it comes to the Gaokao, all of this social capital is temporarily reset to zero. Whether you are the child of a minister or the child of a farmer, the moment you walk into the exam room, there is only a test paper and a pen in front of you. The invigilator does not know you. The grader does not know who you are. Your score is your score. In a society where relationship networks are everywhere, the Gaokao is one of the very few channels that truly looks only at ability and not background. This rare fairness gives Chinese people an almost religious belief in the Gaokao. It seems to be the most solemn promise this society gives to ordinary people. As long as you work hard enough, you can change your fate. The third reason is the sediment of historical memory. From the Sui dynasty to the Qing dynasty, over more than 1,300 years, the imperial examination was almost the only legal channel for social mobility in Chinese society. A young man from a farming family could be working in the fields in the morning and enter the emperor's hall by evening. Someone who had been laboring in the fields in the morning might sit in the Golden Palace at night and receive an audience with the emperor. This kind of narrative circulated in Chinese culture for more than 1,000 years.
It was not only a story, it was the underlying logic of an entire social system. A family might be poor for 3 or 5 generations, but as long as one child was good at studying and good at exams, the social status of the entire family could leap upward. This child would be supported by money gathered from the whole clan, excused from all household labor, and seen as the hope of the entire family. The imperial examination was abolished more than 100 years ago, but this collective memory of one exam changing the fate of an entire family has already been deeply embedded in the cultural genes of Chinese society. In a certain sense, the Gaokao is the spiritual successor of the imperial examination in modern society. The fourth reason is the deep influence of the one-child policy. From 1980 to 2015, China carried out a strict family planning policy, and most urban families could only have one child. This meant that all the expectations, all the resources, and all the anxiety of one family were concentrated on one child. There was no fallback plan of saying, if this child fails, there will be another one. This child's Gaokao score became the family's only chance. Parents projected their own unfinished dreams and all their imagination of the future onto that one test paper. Those parents standing outside the exam sites under the burning sun, holding thermos bottles, silently praying with their hands together, were not just waiting for a score, they were waiting for the answer to the entire second half of their own lives. I still remember my mother saying this to me back then. I do not care what university you go to. In any case, you must go to university. The major does not matter because I did not get into university back then, and you need to experience the atmosphere of university life. Looking back now, it was exactly this kind of obsession from parents that buried the futures of so many children. The fifth reason is the real pressure created by China's urban-rural divide. China still has a huge gap between cities and the countryside. If a child from a rural family performs well in the Gaokao, enters a good university, and finds a respectable job in the city after graduation, he can move his household registration to the city. His next generation can enjoy urban education and medical resources. His parents may also be able to follow him to the city in old age and say goodbye to the life of working the land under the sun. But if he does not do well, he will most likely return to the countryside or go to a factory in the city to work, repeating the life path of his parents' generation. For rural families, the Gaokao is a very real threshold that directly affects quality of life. It is not an abstract idea of realizing personal value. It is the concrete question of whether my child will sit in an office in the future or stand on an assembly line. But if we look at it through today's logic, is the Gaokao really nothing more than a useless, cruel survival of the fittest exam? I also want to talk about the other side. The Gaokao is cruel, and it has brought enormous pressure to countless families. But at the level of institutional design, it has indeed done what it promised to do. It gives people at the very bottom a path of upward mobility that they can actually reach. In China, every year, many children from remote mountain areas and poor rural villages enter university campuses in big cities such as Beijing, Shanghai, Nanjing, and Wuhan through the Gaokao. They become the first university students in their families. On the day their admission letters arrive in the village, the whole village may set off firecrackers. Their parents may set up several tables of food at the doorway and invite the villagers to eat together. Emotionally, that scene is exactly the same as the scene more than 1,000 years ago, when a poor scholar passed the Jinshi examination, rode home on a tall horse, and was welcomed by his entire clan along the road. It can truly be called a turning point in life where knowledge changes fate. This is why the Gaokao in China is not just an exam, it is a ritual, a social ritual about fairness, hope, and class mobility. Every midsummer, when more than 10 million 18-year-olds open their exam papers and pick up their pens at the same time, they are not only taking a test of knowledge, they are participating in a civilizational contract that has lasted for 1,400 years. This society promises you that your birth does not decide your final destination, that your effort can be seen, and that your talent has a chance to be judged fairly. Is this promise perfect? Of course not. Has this promise always been fully honored? Of course not. But the very existence of this promise, and the fact that the whole society believes in it and protects it together, is one of the deepest stabilizing forces in Chinese society. From 605 CE, when Emperor Yang of Sui established the Jinshi examination, to 1905, when the Qing government abolished the imperial examination, then to 1952, when New China held its first Gaokao, then to 1977, when Deng Xiaoping restored the Gaokao, and finally to those 2 days every summer today, when the whole country seems to fall silent. This line runs through nearly 1,400 years of Chinese history. Along this line, there were the proud and energetic new Jinshi scholars in Tang Dynasty Chang'an, the anonymous exam papers with sealed names in the Song examination halls, the hunched backs of Ming Dynasty candidates writing 8-leg essays inside tiny examination cells, the 30-year-old sent-down youth solving math problems under kerosene lamps in the winter of 1977, and the 18-year-old students today who are woken up by their mothers at 5:30 in the morning, drink a bowl of hot porridge, carry a transparent stationery bag, and walk toward the examination room. The form has changed, the content has changed, but the most central thing has not changed. That thing is this: an ordinary person, through their own mind and effort, can win a better future under a fair set of rules. This belief has supported Chinese society for 1,400 years. It will continue to support it. If you have Chinese friends around you, the next time you see them suddenly become nervous or anxious in summer, or see them sharing lucky images online and wishing people success in exams, now you know what stands behind it. It is not just an exam. It is the annual fulfillment of one of the oldest promises of a civilization. At the end of today's episode, I have chosen a few lines written by top imperial examination scholars in history. I will translate them simply so you can get a feeling for them. In 731 CE, during the Tang Dynasty, Wang Wei wrote, "The palace gates open as if they belong to the heavens above, and envoys and officials from many nations, dressed in their most formal robes, bow before the emperor." What this means is that the gates of the imperial palace opened like the gates of a heavenly palace, and envoys and officials from countries across the world wore their most solemn ceremonial clothing to pay respect to this great emperor. Inside these lines, there is an overwhelming confidence. Chang'an of the Tang Dynasty is compared to a heavenly palace, Emperor Xuanzong of Tang is compared to a heavenly ruler, and the scene of countless nations coming to court is captured in just 14 Chinese characters. This is the peak of the High Tang spirit.
In 1256 CE, during the Song Dynasty, when Tianxiang wrote, "Since ancient times, no one has escaped death. What I want is to leave behind a loyal and sincere heart that can shine through history." Its meaning is this: from ancient times until now, who in this world can avoid death? I am willing to use my death to leave behind a heart of absolute loyalty and sincerity, and let it illuminate the pages of history. In 1511 CE, during the Ming Dynasty, Yang Shen wrote, "The mighty Yangtze River rolls eastward, and its waves wash away the heroes of history." Its meaning is this: look at the Yangtze River, endlessly flowing east, never stopping. Across thousands of years, so many heroes and great figures have been swept away by the flood of time, just like waves disappearing into the river. If you could travel back to ancient China, do you think you would have the confidence to take the imperial examination and stand out among so many essays? Alright, that is all for today's interesting Chinese culture. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.
If you enjoyed today's episode, feel free to give the show a like, subscribe, and share it with someone you think would enjoy it too. Thank you for spending this time with me. I will see you in the next episode.